Hello, web workers. Welcome to another episode of Make It Pretty. This is Tom Watts, and I'll be talking to you today about contrast and space in your web and digital designs and how that affects accessibility. So let's start with color. We want obviously colors that people can see. We have all these new capabilities in Sitefarm with our new section styles and all the colors that we have in our color palette, and we want to make sure that everything we're producing is visible to the majority of our audience. So the big thing is contrast in colors. So if you cover the contrast correctly, you're covering it for both low vision and colorblind users. So if you meet that 4.5 to 1 ratio, which is the web standard for WebAIM, then you're gonna be able to serve people who have low visibility and also issues with color blindness with certain combinations. So as long as you hit that contrast ratio, you're good to go. So how do you measure to make sure you've done that? The easiest way to do that is to go to the WebAIM website. So here's the link here. I've also thrown it in the chat. This gives you the ability to say, okay, my foreground color is this blue, 0000FF, and my background color is white, which is all Fs, and it allows you to see exactly what the ratio would be. So you can see, in this case, that's well above the standard, so the contrast is high enough for 99% of audiences. So it's pretty easy to check. The good news about web contrast, if you're in Sitefarm, it's pretty well covered. The development team has gone out of their way to work really hard to make sure that most of the site is completely covered with contrast. So if you throw a color in that needs a white foreground color, it's going to accommodate you. And if you need a color, if you throw a color in that's lighter that needs a dark foreground color, it's going to automatically select those for you. There are some cases in which you might want to test, specifically if you're sub-theming your Sitefarm website or using any styling that you've overridden, you've used a CSS style to override a specific component or something like that. In that case, you can just go right back to the WebAIM and say, hey, I'm going to check my colors on the tool and make sure that that the contrast meets the standard. So colors are pretty easy. There's no real excuse to not have fully compliant colors for accessibility. So that's the good news. So we'll move on from color to white space. So this is something that's been an issue for me in my whole career here at Davis. When I first came in almost 18 years ago, the trend at the time was to get everything on your homepage, as much information as possible, because that was the most important page of your website, the entrance point for your users, that they were going to get as much information as possible. Which has completely changed since I've arrived here. Obviously, search has changed your entrance points, and also the understanding that when you cram a website full of information, it actually drowns out 80% of that. It's invisible to users. So this is straight from WCAG as far as accessibility. We want to make sure that we have white space because it reduces the clutter I just described. It gives the viewer a clear overview of the entire page, right? So it gives them obvious places to go within your page. So if you have a directive you want your users to achieve, it's applying to the university or for financial aid or housing or whatever it is, you can guide them to that call to action much easier in a less cluttered page. It aids navigation, like I just described, so you'll be able to get through the page easier, which is another thing for accessibility. And then for those with cognitive and learning disabilities, white space has been shown through oodles of research to make that process easier for them. So if you have a ton of clutter, it's much harder for somebody with a cognitive issue to get through that, because it's harder for everyone to get through that. So the simpler you can make your websites, the more focused you can have your content, and the more breathing room you can give your users, the better. So I'll give you a couple of examples. This is a very extreme example from old web of a bad use of white space, right? So here we've got 3-column design, which we never really endorse from the Stratcom side. We want a much more simple design than this. We have tons of text. We have lots of links within that text. We have buttons. We have lists of links. We have everything. There's no obvious path for the user to navigate through. So this this website has decided we don't have one thing that we want people to do, so we're giving them everything, which creates that problem of cognitive overload that just you don't know where to go. Like what are you supposed to do here? You're gonna have to scan the entire page. It's gonna take you minutes to get through that whole page to decide what you want to do. And what I think is always the challenge that people don't understand is when you do that, 90% of this is actually invisible to the user. It's like you don't even have it there. And so that makes it even more difficult. So they're going to find something. It's probably not going to be the thing they need. They're just going to find the first thing that makes some sense to them. And that's where, a good white space example could show us a little bit of a better path. So let's look at one of those now. This is Airbnb. You can see the blocks of white space outlined in this diagram here. So tons of white space, right? At least 50 to maybe 60% of the page is not used from a visual standpoint. Now, that's kind of a misnomer because it is being used. It's being used to kind of guide you to the specific areas that they have outlined as calls to action. So they have their main call to action here, which is just to find an Airbnb that works for you and to search that. But they also have separated these into different areas, right? So we have kind of the admin menu at the top right. That's separated out by its own white space. So it's a separate area for users to locate and use in a different way than their main search area. So it also kind of guides your usership in that way. So if somebody's a return user, they kind of know where to go and they have a specific area kind of cordoned off to use that for. And then if they're, just using it in the 90% use case, they've got a bunch of real estate dedicated to that. And the biggest, brightest call to action is to do that search, right? So they're guiding their users to the 99% use case for their site, which is what you would want to do. So if you have, you might have one or two things that you want to get to guide people to, but if one part of your site is used the most, use your pages to guide people to that service, right? That's kind of the guide. It doesn't matter if you want, we need to get more usership on these other pages, and so we want to drive up traffic to those other pages. Well, if that's not what people need, then you're kind of blocking your user. So Airbnb has decided, hey, we have these other things in this admin menu to the top right that people can use, but we want people, because we know that the biggest conversion we have for users to use Airbnb is to search here, find their available location and book that location. So that's something they've done. Obviously, you see below here they've got another section that they have users for just booked and related and all that stuff, and that's all fine as long as you keep enough white space around the main areas to guide your users to those main calls to action. So like it says in the title, clear and obvious content that lets you catch your breath and find your way. So here we don't feel overwhelmed. We know where to go. There's a clear call to action and we can move forward. So that's kind of white space in general. I know it can be a challenge with stakeholders for them to understand, hey, everything doesn't have to be on the homepage. Most of the entrances come in subpages through search. You still, obviously your homepage is still important and you want to use that correctly. But my advice in that realm is to focus that on one or two main calls to action and use white space to guide your users to that content. So if you have any questions about this, we can talk about it after this presentation, or you can email me at my email and we can talk it through. If you have any difficulty in meetings with your stakeholders or you want an expert voice brought into any of those meetings, I'd be happy to help. Thanks.